Today we're going to be talking about monetizing your web presence. My name is Leona Laurie, and I am a social media strategist and trainer, among other things. I've been in marketing for 13 years, and my business has been focused on using blogs and social media strategically for the last 8 years. Today we're going to talk about how to generate additional revenue using your website and your web presence. Now, I asked when we were first getting started if you would put yourselves on mute during the duration of today's webinar. However, we do have a manageable group on the live line today, so if you'd like to come off and ask questions at any time, please feel free to. We'll also have a Q&A period at the end of the call, so if you have questions you want to hold until then, you can. This is our overview for today. We're going to talk about using your web presence to generate income and maximize the return on investment for having a web presence at all. And I've got a 5-step strategy that I think you will get a lot out of. Hope you will. And we're going to go ahead and dive in. So this might seem obvious, but the first thing you need to do when you are looking to monetize your web presence more effectively is set your intentions. In my experience, it is not an obvious first step to a lot of people, so that's why it's part of our presentation today. The first thing you need to decide is how you'd like to monetize your web presence, directly, indirectly, or both. And what that means is, are you interested in increasing the revenue that's coming directly from advertising on your website or paid tweets, sponsored updates on Facebook, sponsored videos on YouTube? That's direct monetization, when you are making direct results of monetizing your web presence. You have advertising that is generating revenue. So that's direct monetization. Indirect monetization is when your web presence allows you to generate new revenue through new opportunities. So let's say, for example, that you've increased the size of your online audience and the level of engagement of your online audience. And because of that large audience, you now have the opportunity to increase the advertising that you're doing on your radio station, on your television station, that you're getting speaking opportunities for yourself or other people in your organization, and they are paid speaking opportunities, that you're getting opportunities to write for publications in your field and you're being paid for those opportunities, that you're getting opportunities on television as a result of what you're doing online, where you are the subject of a program and you're being paid for it. Those are indirect monetization opportunities that come from a robust and engaged web presence. So if you want to do direct, you're just looking to generate money on your website and through sponsored and paid tweets and Facebook posts and things along those lines. Doing indirect, you're looking to get new opportunities for monetization and revenue outside of your web presence as a result of a robust web presence. And if you want to do both, you can. But the first thing you need to do is decide what you're going to do. Now, doing both is great, and there are a lot of people who aim for both. As long as you've set your intentions clearly, you're in good shape. Concurrent with the step of setting your intentions about how you want to increase revenue as a result of working on your web presence, you need to clarify who you are trying to reach. And if you haven't done this recently or haven't done it at all, it's important to be very clear about who your audience is. Because if you haven't really identified who your audience is, it is impossible to effectively reach them. If you are saying, we want to reach everybody in this geographic area, that's fine. It's a great start, but it's going to be a lot easier to effectively draw people in if you can be clearer about the specific individuals in that geographic area you want to reach. I'd say it's a very rare case where any organization really wants every single person in a specific area. Chances are you're looking for people within a certain age range, people within a certain income range, people with certain interests. So if you haven't done it recently, you need to be really clear about who you want to reach. And you should put it in writing. You could create profiles of who your audience members are, just samples that you mock up, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. Part of why this is so important is that you need to be able to identify where your audience is already spending time online. So if you're trying to engage them, you've got to be where they are. And if you don't have a very clear idea of who they are, it's impossible to say where they are. If you are looking at women over 35 who are stay-at-home moms and are in your geographic region, those women are probably on Facebook. And that is a place you should be and where you can be actively working to engage those women. If you are looking for teenagers who are mostly male, that's not necessarily where you're going to find them. So clarifying who you're after is the first step in clarifying where they are and where you need to be in order to engage with them. The next part of this first step is setting your timeline. I think it's possible to monetize your web presence in 6 months. I think that's very doable. If this is new territory for you, you might want to set a longer timeline from step 1 to seeing money coming in. So 12 months is the outside timeline that I would recommend. And the reason it's important to have a clear sense of that at the beginning is that that's how you're going to be able to gauge your progress through the process by saying, okay, we're at month 5 and we still haven't seen any progress in our audience growth or engagement. You know, if you're on a 12-month timeline, that's not necessarily the end of the world. But if you set a 6-month timeline, you're kind of in crunch time at that point. You should have seen some movement. So setting the timeline will help you get a sense of how successful you're being as you progress through this process. And then finally, determining some objectives for audience growth and engagement. And what I mean by that is basically target numbers. So audience growth, if you're looking at the overall size of your online audience, and you have in your combined audience this many people coming to your website each month, this many people following you on Twitter, this many people who have liked you on Facebook, you can go through all of your different web presences, add that number together and say, okay, roughly we have this many people who are already members of our audience. Where do we want that to be at the end of this process? You can decide that a number of ways. One of the ways is looking at your competition and getting a sense of how large their audience is. And if it's significantly larger than yours, one of your goals is going to be bridging that gap. Or if you have a sense of how many members of your target audience there are in the range that you're trying to reach, like the geographic area that you're trying to reach, you can decide from there how many people we want to have in our online audience at the end of this process based on how many people there are available to have in your audience. So setting that number of total audience size is going to be one of your tools for measuring your success, your goals. Audience engagement means how many of those people in your audience are actively engaged with you online. How many of them are commenting on the things that you publish and sharing them? How many likes are you getting for the individual things that you put up? How many retweets are you getting for your average tweet? So those engagement numbers are really important when you're looking at monetizing your web presence. They are potentially more important than total audience size. I want to show you an example of someone who is very effectively monetizing her web presence, both directly and indirectly. And chances are the Pioneer Woman is not necessarily a member of your list of competition, but I think she's a great example of somebody who's doing a lot right. And at heart, when she started, she was a housewife in Oklahoma, in rural Oklahoma. So if she can do it, anyone who has an established business, an established web presence, and potentially a broadcast channel to reach an audience through, any of you can do this. We're going to take a look at her site, and I'm going to show you some of the things she's doing directly and indirectly to monetize her site. And she's a really good example of having an engaged audience, which has been the key to her success from the beginning. So Ree Drummond, who you may already be familiar with because now she is a public figure, started blogging in 2006 when she was a stay-at-home, homeschooling mom of 4 on a rural cattle ranch in Oklahoma. And something about her blog just clicked. She really understood the emotional aspect of connecting with the people who were reading it, and a community grew around her. The thing about Ree's audience that has been unique from the very beginning is the degree to which they are engaged. I was working with her through Federated Media in 2008, and at that time, she was getting between 300 and 3,000 comments on the individual posts on her site. That is still great. I mean, if I got those numbers today, I'd feel wonderful about them, and so should you. Now, when she does the contest, she's consistently getting between 30 and 50,000 comments on those posts. I mean, this is an extraordinarily engaged audience, especially if you consider that they're engaged around a woman, a single person, an individual. She's grown into something more than that over time, but essentially that's where she still is. So if this individual can engage people on that level, that's something that we can all aspire to doing as well. Because of the level of engagement of her audience, even when the audience was smaller than it is now, and it's a pretty sizable audience now, that was very attractive to advertisers and sponsors. People wanted to get involved with her because when she said something like, you got to check out this kitchen tool, you have to try this camera, you got to use this printer, her audience would do it. They were engaged with her. They believed her. They listened to her, and they would respond to her. And so that is very powerful when you're trying to monetize your web presence, to have an audience so engaged with you that they really are listening when you make a recommendation, and they really respond. And when you get to the point where you're having any kind of sponsorship, whether it's advertising on your website or something more than that, a campaign where a sponsor is paying for sections of your site, pieces of your content, where you're getting sponsored tweets or sponsored updates, or they're doing sponsored videos through you on YouTube, whenever there's a sponsor behind it, that person wants a sense that your audience is really paying attention to their message through you. So that level of engagement is really important. What Rhea is doing in terms of monetization and what she's been doing for a long time is a combination of direct and indirect. And if you visit her site, you can see this. She has a section now, Tasty Kitchen. I'm going to click through to that. This entire section is sponsored. It grew out of a sponsorship. This is a way that her site, her community, and her offerings grew in direct response to somebody wanting to sponsor a food-focused area for her community that is linked to her brand and her site. She also has banner advertising. She does very well with it. It's not necessarily going to be a big moneymaker for the average site, but it's something that she does here. She has sponsored content on a fairly regular basis. So those are all direct monetization. Indirectly, the size and engagement of her audience have led to multiple book deals. You can see she's published multiple cookbooks now, and I think she's got 3. There's only 2 showing up here. She's been publishing children's books, and she has a show on the Food Network now. So this is someone who has taken her web audience, which came first from blogging and then through active participation in social media, engaged that audience in a way where they felt like they were making a personal connection with her and like they were making a personal connection with each other. She created a sense of community in her space. and then translated that into direct monetization opportunities and indirect monetization opportunities. If you aren't already familiar with her, I would really recommend that you take some time to explore her site after this. It's a beautiful site, and you'll be able to see, just by visiting it, all the different ways that she's engaged people. She started with her own original content and her own activities and engaged her audience around it. But as time has gone by, if you look at her homeschooling section, for example, she has other people contributing content here. She's gone to another level of engagement where people who were members of her community are now members of her content generation group. So there's a lot to learn just looking at her site. It's beautiful. She keeps it current in terms of the technology and the content. There's a lot going on here. Oh, here's the new cookbook. So spend some time with the Pioneer Woman and take a look at the different ways she's monetizing her web presence directly and indirectly. There's an exercise that I have my clients do to identify their target audiences. And it's basically imagining individual members of your target audience. So here's a sample one of my clients did, and I'm going to show you. She let me publish all of the different ones she did here. So for her audience includes an HR professional, a 45 to 65-year-old professional woman in San Francisco, and the male weekend warrior. So for each of these ideal members of her target audience, she found a photo online that represented them, and she sort of fleshed out who they were as individuals. This exercise is something that if you haven't been doing, you should be doing at least once a year. Really connecting on your mental and emotional level with who your ideal target audience members are. It makes it a lot easier to pursue them, for one thing, if you have a clear sense of who they are, but also to relate to them. And that relation, the human element of any of the things that you're doing online is what engages people. The fact that they feel like they can relate to you as an organization, as the individuals behind an organization, they want to connect. And so if you have a sense of who they are, it makes it easier for you to speak in a voice online that is going to relate to those people and connect with them. So if you are targeting the male weekend warrior and you're able to imagine a specific guy who fits into that group, you know who he is a little bit. He's working 9 to 5. He's playing different sports in his free time. In her case, he has an injury that plagues him. You know that he drinks beer after his sporting activity. And you have a sense of the other businesses that he is paying attention to and patronizing, the other places that he's spending his money and time. This first step of really clearly identifying the individuals in your target audience makes it so much easier to find and connect with them online. And finding and connecting with them is something you have to do if you're going to monetize that web presence. Okay, step 2, the critical audit. If you have not already done this, this is super important. You need to look very critically at your own web presence and compare it to that of your competition. If they are outstripping you in their web presence, then that will explain a lot if they are also outstripping you in terms of total income or income opportunities. So you want to look for them everywhere they are online, and you should be documenting this and tracking it. Look at their website. Compare it to yours. Be critical. Is their website better than yours? Is it more engaging? Do you, as an individual, want to spend more time on their site than you are on your own site? That's important. Your website is your best opportunity for monetization, both in terms of direct and indirect opportunities. That is your front door. Any of the other things that you're doing online, lead there. And if you have an offline broadcast presence, beyond that to there. But this is the welcome mat. Your website is your welcome mat. And if it's not welcoming, if you don't have curb appeal, then you're going to be losing people when they get to that point. They won't go beyond it. So look at what your competition is doing with their websites. Are they better looking than yours? Are they faster than yours? Are they more engaging than yours? What can you do to improve yours? And if theirs aren't better than yours, great. Give yourself a pat on the back. You're in good shape. Take a look at their social profiles. What social sites are they active on, and are you there? What communities do they belong to? You know, for some of the audience groups that you might want to be targeting, they're not necessarily as active on social media as they are on forums. You know, Joe Rogan, for example, has a very vital forum, a lot of guys there. Or 4chan, I don't know if you've heard of that, but that is more of a forum, a lot of guys there. And so depending on who you're trying to reach, they might be more active in forums or online communities than they are in the traditional social networking. If your competition also has a presence there and you don't, then your competition has a leg up. So make a comprehensive list. Where's the competition? Where should you be? Are you there? And then review your data collection process. How well are you collecting data about your online audience? You know, if you're in broadcasting, there are a lot of numbers you're probably using to gauge your success with attracting and retaining your audience. Are you doing that same kind of data collection for your online audience? I'm guessing that some people are. A lot of people aren't thinking of it that way. These are hard numbers that you can be collecting, where you can be looking at exactly who you're engaged with online and how they are interacting with you, you know, and those numbers are critical when you're trying to monetize your web presence. It's the same thing as anything you would do in any other medium. If someone's going to pay you money to engage with your audience on any level, you have to be able to tell them exactly who that audience is, how frequently they're visiting you, how large the size is, how deeply engaged they are with you. And those are numbers that you can definitely get. They're not that difficult to access. Here's a sample, and this is just a very basic sample of what it can look like to track your competition. So if you've got a list of your 3 to 5 biggest competitors, and you know what their website is, and you're looking at them on all of the different social networks where your audience should be, you can track how big their audience is, how frequently they're updating their social presence. This is just the basics of something that you're doing in Word, in Excel, on your own. You don't have to pay any outside service for this. This is the basics of tracking what they're up to and then comparing it to yourself. So I made up this fictional Jones company, and I created a list of the different places you might find the Jones Company online. And you'll notice that I've included their name on each of these different sites. So if you went to facebook.com/Jones Company in this hypothetical situation, this is what you would find, that they have 34,654 likes and that they're updating on average 3 times a day. So when you know what the competition is doing, and you do the same tracking for yourself, you can see point by point how you compare. Are they doing more than you? Is their audience bigger than yours? Are there areas where you're ahead of them? In this case, the Jones Company is not active on Google, and they don't have that big an audience or that many updates on LinkedIn. Is that because your shared audience isn't there, or is it because they're missing an opportunity that you can capitalize on? So having the numbers, having a sense of what your competition is doing, it gives you the tools you need to respond to that and to evaluate your own performance. Now, these numbers that I made up for the Jones Company on YouTube are great numbers. If they're doing that and you are doing that, then good for you all. For data tracking, I use a service called Sprout Social. And there are a lot of different ways that you can go about data tracking for your online audience. I really like Sprout for a number of reasons. Sprout serves as a content aggregator. So through my Sprout Social account, I'm able to monitor what's going on across several social profiles and push content out to all of those social profiles from one location. Sprout has a very easy-to-use scheduling function where you can schedule content to go up in the future. You can schedule content to go out repeatedly in the future. If there's something, like say that you're promoting a contest, for example, and you want to have a reminder go out to your audience at the same time every 3 to 4 days, very easy to do through Sprout Social. You can also do a lot of different reporting through Sprout. They have reports where they'll give you the basics, and I've got a Sprout homepage for one of my clients up here where you can see at a glance how large their Facebook and Twitter audience segments are. You can see they've broken it down at a glance to male and female followers, and they're telling me the different age ranges they fall into. Their reporting function, if you go deeper into it, will also allow you to compare your social activity to that of your competitors. So if you want to generate some additional reporting beyond just the basic one we just looked at, this is a good way to do that. You can also look at deeper reporting for each of the social services you're connected to. And they'll give you a sense of how successful you're being in terms of the influence you have with your audience and the level of engagement you've got with your audience. So I really recommend this tool. I like it a lot. Their basic package is $50 a month, so it's something to consider if you're looking at this. Hootsuite has a lot of similar functions. I'm not as crazy about their interface, but it's cheaper. It's only $10 a month for the pro version that will give you a lot of the same functionality here. If you're using a service like HubSpot or, I know there is a lot of competition in this space, there are a lot of tools out there that will help you manage your online presence, which is great for sustainability, and see what the data is coming out of it. And if you haven't already got something like that, it's time to look into it. If you want to monetize your web presence, a tool like this is really going to help you on that path. Okay, so you've identified who your audience is and where your audience is. You've set your timeline. You know what you're trying to accomplish. You've got a sense of what your numbers are. You've reviewed your web presence. It's time to execute. So this is where you're going to create your plan. If the competition is ahead of you in terms of their websites or any of their web presence, this is when you're going to bring yourself up to that level. The website is the first and top priority. The reason for this is that it's your welcome mat, like I said. Any of the time and energy and ultimately money that you're spending on building the audience you're going to leverage for new revenue, any of that time and money you spend that draws them back to a website that is subpar is not money well spent. That is not going to give you your best return on your investment. Your website is the space that you own. So it has you've got the most control over that space, more control than you necessarily have over the social sphere. You've got more opportunities for direct monetization there because you can create ad zones, you can do sponsored content. There's a lot to do with a well-functioning website. And your website should not be an expense. It shouldn't just be something you're spending money on building and maintaining. It can work for you. It should be generating revenue. If it's a good site, it can and will do that. So that is your first priority. When you're creating the budget that goes with this new plan to monetize your web presence, the website is the top priority. Sustainable social media management is the next priority. And there's a lot that goes into it. Having a successful social presence is time-consuming, and time really is money. So you have to decide, how much money are we spending on sustaining our social presence? How much time are we spending? This is definitely a situation where you're going to be putting in before you take out. And whether you're putting in time and energy before you take out money, or you're putting in time, energy, and money before you take out money, you're going to be putting in before you take out. Who is going to be doing this? Do you already have somebody on your team you can delegate this to who's going to do it well and in line with your strategy and your voice? Do you need to hire somebody? And if you're just doing the execution of day-to-day, you can hire somebody young. You know, this is the management of the social presence is something that you can give to a junior level employee or an intern as long as they're being supervised properly. You know, for the strategy, you might want to bring in a consultant if you don't have somebody on staff who really knows this, how to do this kind of thing. You might want to bring in somebody senior level internally or externally to help you with that. But in terms of the execution, once you've got the strategy in place and you have a clear sense of how you're going to approach this, you can probably have somebody junior level do it. Or are you going to be doing it yourself? You might want to do that. There are ways that makes sense. If you're a small organization or if you're a really hands-on kind of leader, it makes sense for you to be involved in the day-to-day execution of the social media. But you need to decide in advance how you're going to do that sustainably. And if you're looking at the competition and you've seen that they're updating each of their social profiles 3 times a day, even if you're using a tool like Sprout to help you manage that, it costs money and it takes time. How are you going to do that? You have to build that in when you're planning, and then you have to stick to it once you start executing. Consistency is key here. If you start big and you say, oh, we're going to update our blog 10 times a week, we're going to update our Twitter 30 times a day, we're going to update Facebook 40 times a day, you know, those numbers are ambitious. So make sure that you're not just looking at what the competition is doing, you're also looking at what you're capable of sustaining. Because whatever precedent you set is what you're training your new audience members or your existing audience members, you're training them to expect that from you. And it's what's going to contribute to your growth, the ongoing engagement, and ultimately the monetization. When you get to the point where sponsors are coming in and you've got people who are paying you money, they're going to expect you to be able to sustain whatever you've started to. So really keep in mind what your budget of time and money is for creating a sustainable social media strategy. Engagement. So a couple of the ideas that I've got here for you: strategic partners, contests, and giveaways. If you have an offline opportunity, if you are a broadcaster, if you've got a radio station or a television station, if you've got a channel offline that you can use to engage your audience, you can cross-promote across both. If you're paying attention to your audience, if you are listening to them, not just talking at them, but listening to them and trying to engage with them as individuals as well as a group, that is going to lead to relationships with these people where they feel invested in you. They're going to be more deeply engaged with you. Strategic partners and contests and giveaways are kind of shortcuts. If you have a contest or giveaway going that you can do exclusively online, or if you have an offline channel as well that you can cross-promote with, people love that. You know, if you're giving away something cool, they're going to engage with you about that. It's an easy way to engage people. It shouldn't be the only tool in your toolbox, but it should be one of the tools. It's an easy way to get people engaged. Strategic partners, in my mind, are other organizations, companies, or individuals who share your target audience, where you can share traffic without necessarily exchanging money. And I'm using Kim Kardashian as my example of the ideal strategic partner. Now, the Kardashians, if you haven't been studying the way they use the internet, it's time to pay attention to the Kardashians. They really know how to take advantage of every opportunity that comes their way. They are monetizing their web presence. Not every single tweet that Kim puts up that mentions some specific brand is sponsored. I'm sure that a lot of them are spontaneous. But if you had somebody like her who has a robust and engaged audience talking about you, that would be amazing. I am using this particular tweet as an example where she says, "Thank you to Michael Costa and Hermes Paris for the sweet gift for North." So they gave her daughter a gift. She mentioned it on Twitter, and it's gotten 186 retweets. That's significant. Kim has an audience of almost 19 million followers, and 186 of those people have rebroadcast that single tweet to all of their audience. So for that one tweet, she has a potential audience of her 19 million plus the combined total of all of those 186 people's additional audience. That is powerful. And if you have a strategic partner who shares your audience and has a robust online presence of their own, having that person mention you in conjunction with something where they're getting something out of it is a shortcut to engaging your audience and growing your audience. Suddenly, their audience knows about you and has a reason to come check you out. The contests and giveaways combined with strategic partners, that's a really great shortcut. Let's say, for example, that you are in Austin, Texas, and that you are trying to reach hipsters of both genders who are between 18 and 30 years old. Think of all of the different companies in the Austin, Texas area who are also trying to reach that audience. Not necessarily just your competition, but companies who just share your objectives. They want to engage those people. Those people can become strategic partners if they're up-and-comers and they've got a robust online presence. It's worth considering opportunities where they're not necessarily paying you money to be featured on your website or across your different web streams. They can be providing something else, exposure to their audience, your shared audience. So contests and giveaways, let's say you find a sunglass manufacturer who has the same audience as you and the same geographic reach as you. If you come up with a way to promote their sunglasses across your channels in exchange for them talking you up across their channels, that strategic partnership can be a shortcut to audience growth and engagement. So that's the kind of thing you want to think about while you're in the growth phase, while you're trying to increase the size of your audience and increase the engagement, because those are the things that are going to help you monetize: the size of the audience, the level of engagement. Step 4, regular analysis of your progress, weekly or monthly, at least monthly, if not weekly. You should be looking at the data you're collecting. You should be comparing yourself to the competition on a regular basis. And if it isn't working, ask why before you throw the baby out with the bathwater. One of the situations I was in recently, I was talking to somebody who said, we've spent so much money on advertising trying to grow our audience, and it isn't working. The advertising is failing. It's a waste of our money to advertise. Their website was in such terrible shape, and they weren't collecting any data on conversion of people coming from those ads to the website. So it's impossible to say whether or not the ads were failing. The website was failing. If I got to one of those ads and clicked through to come to that website, that would be the end of my journey. I wouldn't be going any further than that. And if they're not tracking the data, it's impossible to say, did those ads send traffic our way? Was that money well spent? How did we convert those people? How long did we retain them? How well did we engage them? The website was a hot mess. So if you've prioritized your website and if you're tracking the data, you'll be able to see things like that. The data should answer the question, why isn't this working? And step 5 is monetize. So you've set your thresholds at the outset for how large you want your audience to be and how deeply you want them to be engaged. And once you cross either of those thresholds, or ideally both of them, it's time to monetize your web presence. And there are a lot of ways you can do that. If you have relationships with potential advertisers or sponsors, you can go direct to them and say, look, our online audience is robust. It is this big. We have this level of engagement. We think there are more opportunities for you through our web presence than you necessarily are aware of. And if you can cite the numbers, that conversation should be a good conversation. There should be a result there. You can monetize offline by creating new relationships with potential advertisers or sponsors. You can use third-party agencies. Federated Media, whom I mentioned earlier, has grown to become, according to the last thing I read, the 6th largest advertising agency in the world. Their expertise is monetizing websites that have a big audience. So if you worked with somebody like them, if you went to them and said, look, we have this many people in our monthly audience. Let's say you have 1 million people coming to your site every month, and 300,000 of them are actively engaged with you across your different web portals. If you go to somebody like Federated Media, and they're the best at what they do, so they're definitely who I would go to, and say, we want you to get advertisers across our different web platforms. Somebody like that already has the relationships with the advertisers, but they also know how to create comprehensive campaigns that work across all of your different web presence areas and can engage people in more than one way. So if they go to somebody that they're working with and say, we're going to do a comprehensive campaign, and it's going to be centered on this site. You're going to have banner media. You're going to have sponsored tweets. We're going to be creating video content. You know, somebody like that, a third party like Federated Media, will know how to monetize with you and for you. You'll learn from them while you're making money through them. You have to have the audience numbers and the audience engagement numbers for that to work, but that's going to be true no matter what way you're trying to monetize. And it's important to be creative. The contests and giveaways, again, they're an easy way to be creative. You know, you can work with your strategic partners. You can work with your sponsors or advertisers. It's the kind of thing that if you're working through a third party, they can help you create a really dynamic contest or giveaway. But you should also be thinking outside of the traditional box for what sponsorship and advertising are. And if you are working with your new sponsors, your partners, and your audience, if you have successfully engaged your audience, you can include them in the creative process of who should we be working with and how can we be monetizing this. And I wouldn't recommend it necessarily being something like, hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. How can we make money off of you? You know, but if you're paying attention to them, to the things that they're saying, the other places they're spending time online, the data you're collecting can answer that question. How can we engage them in this process? How can we get them on board? And, you know, people love to share their opinions. So if you can figure out the structure for how you get their opinion about monetizing them, they'll help you. Here are your next steps. If you need an outside perspective in order to honestly evaluate how you're doing, get one. It is not a waste of money to have an outside consultant help you evaluate how you're doing with your web presence. And I think that's a really easy place to start, whether it's me or somebody like me, someone who knows how to look at it critically and tell you, here are the areas where you should be investing your time and energy for the best return on your investment. If you have someone in your organization already, great. That person would be a huge asset at a time like this. But if you don't, this is an investment to have somebody come and look at this with you and determine where your potential revenue streams are and how to get there effectively. This is worth spending some money on. This process should be ongoing. This is an annual process at the very least. Every year you should be looking at your website, at your web presence, and that of your competition. You should be reviewing who your target audience is and where they are. All of the things that we're looking at online are totally dynamic. The audience moves every year. It grows on some sites, it shrinks on others. Pew and Nielsen are both releasing reports on a pretty regular basis that'll give you an idea of where the audience is active. And the Pew report just came out for last year. So if you go to Pew Research, and I will include a link to that on the landing page for this webinar, they've got the numbers of where the audience is in terms of size and demographics on all the different social channels. So that kind of data is out there and available to you. A Google search will bring you a lot of information, but it's something you need to do every year because the audience changes and moves. So if you say, okay, we know who our audience is and they're on Facebook, and 5 years from now you haven't reevaluated that, definitely you're behind the times. Imagine if you had done this project, gone through this process in 2006, 2005. In 2005, your audience was on MySpace more than likely. They're probably not there anymore. So if you haven't reconsidered your strategy and, you know, reallocated the eggs in baskets since 2005, it's time, and you should be doing it on a regular, ongoing basis. Now, I say annually at least. Every 6 months is probably a better idea, but I think for most organizations, an annual review fits better into company life. Look beyond your competition to other areas that share your target audience. So if you already have a sense of that from considering potential strategic partners, you can learn from those people. The Pioneer Woman, I'm guessing, is not a member of your industry. Her website is a valuable resource for you. You can learn from her. She's engaging people and she is monetizing her web presence. The other people online, other organizations, other individuals, and other companies who share your target audience, even if they're not part of your industry, you can learn from them, and you should definitely be paying attention to them. What are they doing well? How can you work with them? There's an opportunity there. And my last note to you is that you need to prepare for success. One of the things that I find really fascinating in the work I do is how people have a lot of contingencies for failure, not a lot of contingencies for success. If you are successful at growing your audience and the engagement level of your audience online over the next year, it could potentially change your business structure. This is something that you need to prepare for. So when you're thinking about the best case scenario for getting these people involved with you so that you can monetize your web presence, it's going to be a creative thinking and a reactive process through the entire thing. This is going to change your business if you do it right, and that's something that you need to be thinking of right from the outset. And this concludes my presentation. You can subscribe to my blog if you'd like to for ongoing updates in this vein. You can stay tuned for the next webinar from Megatrax.